Today was a wild day on the ES, so I'm going to show you how you could have had winning trades, how you could have got a lot of this downside, had some good trades with runners, really low risk trading today. There was a lot of great setups. Now there was some data issues, so I'm going to talk through some of what happened there because some of you might have experienced that. I know I did, and it was a wild day for me because of that. But let's get into these trades and we will see what we got. So I'm going to scroll up here. Basically, we had a range that then turned into a downtrend and turned into a range again. So I'm going to turn off my camera here just so you can see the price action a little bit better and show you what we got. So when we came in for the day, we basically had this setup here where it was just kind of cruising down. There was not a lot of overnight price action. So I drew a range off of these highs here, basically at the close of yesterday's price down to these closes here. And that was my range that I was working with. Now, when I came in this morning, it was somewhere in this zone where we were kind of like sideways right here. Let's see. Yeah, that's about 5 in the morning. So, there was an argument to be made for this right here about 548. There's kind of this tight range working. And so you had this uptrend, but it already played out and gave you a new high from this short-term uptrend breaking, new high. And it kind of broke and sort of gave you, it's almost like two legs. Now, this is the first, by the way, my chart is kind of messed up here because it was I had to close out and reopen it, and then some of my candles looked a little different afterwards. So I hate when that happens. This looked actually slightly different earlier, and I went back and forth with whether or not to mark this as a possible long trade, as sort of like a failed break, because if you were trading this in real time, you kind of had this like really, really tight channel working with these big long tails, but the closes were all within this area. So technically from here, I think you have enough room where basically if you went long there, you could have gotten out for 4 ticks at the high. But I don't know. I just didn't really like it. It just felt too tight and it didn't feel like it was worth the risk. So I stayed out of that one. But if you took it, it's a possibility right there. Now we had this uptrend working. We finally get a break here near the high, and then it pushes up to the high, makes a new high right there, pulls back, and then gives you a high here. So I considered this red bar being a possible short, but at this point, you had to consider that we could have a trend here. You don't know for sure if there is a trend here or not, but you kind of had a possible channel that looked something like that. So you don't want to short that just in case that channel is in play. It ends up not really being in play and the range just kind of wins over there and it just breaks out and it doesn't even make a new high or anything. So it ends up not really being much of a concern. I mean, technically, it ends up giving you a first entry, kind of like a second entry long that fails. But I didn't really like any of that. It was just too sideways for me. So I stayed away from that and just kind of sat patiently. And there wasn't really any trade setups until over here. I was sitting here for close to 2 hours before a trade setup finally happened. And so what ended up happening here was got a short-term downtrend, close outside, new low, short-term uptrend that's kind of wider. So this one is like a little bit more suspect because we're in a range. So this might not even really be a channel right here. But I put it there just because I don't want to short on a channel low there. I want to make sure that we have a proper setup. So it ends up coming up. It falls short of the high here. And so you can see we fell short of that a few times. So I will say I'm going to mark this not a perfect setup, but if someone took this as sort of like a triple test trap, that would actually be somewhat valid because if you look here, I draw this, I'll just draw it from here. You could kind of see that that's like a triple test, 1, 2, 3, falling short of the highs of the range, and that close there. And basically what this gives you is a first entry, second entry short. Not a good signal bar for a second entry short, but it could just be just trapping these longs. Now, if this would have ticked higher and then failed, then I would have said, okay, this is actually a nice enter on the engulfing bar type of setup. But it didn't really give it. So I'll mark it, but I didn't love that because I was thinking we're probably going to at least need to tap up here and then reverse. I don't always love these where you get the 2-bar matching high there. I like it to swing 1 tick and trap people first. So I didn't love that trade, but I'm just going to put the green arrow there because it might have set up a little different on your chart. All right, so then this turns into a tight channel working down, and you actually get a close outside and a new low all in one candle. And the reason I liked this one was if you look at this short-term channel, it kind of looks like this. Like it looks like a failed breakout of this eventually of the short-term channel, which also could be argued that this was another low here. And now you have a 1, 2, 3, basically 4 tests of that low exactly, the bullish bar. So that's why I like that. It was kind of like a support play where you could just end up taking that as a long. You're just trying to get a scalp, maybe try to get back to the EMA or even this midline right here. And you had some room there. You had to get, I think, 1 tick above the midline to get out at 4 ticks. And I was trading this one on 4 ticks because we had a tight ATR again. So anyway, that ends up working out. You get this short-term up channel that ends up breaking here. You don't get a new high on that. And at this point, I'm drawing from here. And I had this a little lower before at some point, but then I widened it just a bit because it fit well in the price action. So you end up with a wider channel that starts to work down. Now, on this wider channel, so you can see you got a lower high. So first you have this high, lower low, lower high, lower low, tries to come up, fails, lower low, lower high. So now you're thinking, okay, we do have definitely a channel here. And this is the first, second, third swing on the highs. So you probably have a downtrend working. You're staying below this 21 EMA now. And now you're getting towards these channel bottoms. So you could have down here. The reason I marked this one is now you actually are at the lows of the range. And you basically come 1 tick above these. So you could kind of call this like a triple test. You know, you basically test it there, and here. It's really like a quadruple test because you have this test, this test, this test, and this test. And so you get a nice long there. You could also look at this as a pullback first entry, pullback second entry. It's kind of hard to really count it like that because really it's from here. It's a first entry, second entry, third entry. So you kind of you have to consider that that's not really a second entry from the total swing of the move, but worth still considering it. And I just kind of saw it as a failed breakout. And so you're just expecting to get a scalp there. It took a second and it kind of went sideways for a second there, but then it eventually went and it filled you like on this candle here. So that was a decent one. I took that trade. I almost marked that as a blue, but the reason I marked it as a green is that you have a break out of this channel, close outside, and a new low, but you don't really have like a higher low. Higher low would have been better here. What I was really hoping for was this red candle to basically tick down to maybe here and then get turned bullish and give us a higher low, but it didn't happen. And that's why this one is green as well, because there's no higher low there. It's a failed breakout on the first swing. You get a trap over here. So now you're off this down channel, and what you get here is this is kind of like a double top. Not exactly. If you look at this, because it's technically lower than this. But what I have here is you're making lower highs still. So from this swing here, you could kind of see this as a possible first entry, pullback, second entry that fails right at the key entry point, right at the EMA, and just reverses. And you could enter this one on the engulfing bar right here. Now the reason it's green is that you're really close to the lows for this regular session. You have some room down to these lows, but it could easily bounce here. So you got to be careful with this one. But I think at this point, it looks like the channel's going to win over. We had gaps below us. So there's reasons to like that. And and the other thing to consider here is that it also kind of looks like a first entry, pullback, second entry short. Now, it's kind of a weird one because it's technically the second entry short triggers and fails, but I still think it's trapping people on both sides. So it traps the shorts who are too early, then it traps the longs, and it gives you kind of that double trap setup. So this was sort of a more advanced kind of double trap setup. I really like this one. And then you could enter this one here, and it just rockets off. I mean, at this point, you had a really, really nice setup. So you could take that one down. You got a runner on that one too. And that was really nice in real time. And it actually turned into this really wild downtrend. So now that you're in the wild downtrend, basically you're not going to always get second entries in a downtrend like this. So it breaks out. Now you have to consider, hey, are we going to get a failed breakout in reverse? But the momentum was just too strong. So what I saw here was the first possible setup here was right here. This candle tried to reverse and immediately went one tick higher, reversed, tried to come up and double top there and gave you this bearish bar. And so for me, I was originally seeing that as like, okay, this is probably going to make a new low here. There's just too much momentum to the downside. So if you took this one on a first entry short, I wouldn't be mad about it. It's a first entry short. From this high, you could almost see this also as a pullback first entry, pullback second entry long failure. So you could see it from from this kind of high area as a second entry long failure as well. A few reasons to like that one. Then it goes down, gives you a scalp. Now, from here, you start to get some pretty nice setups. So from here, from these highs, you kind of have a first entry, second entry that fails. Now, again, these aren't normal second entries, but you could also see this as just a first entry failure. The reason I like this one is it's right off of the trend channel. At this point, you're drawing your trend channel down, and you probably at the time would have had this a little tighter. You probably would have had something more like maybe you would have even had something like that. And that was another reason to like this going down because you need a new low. But then as this started to go here, you might even draw it a little bit wider. Any way that you drew this, it was going to tap it. And so this looks like a possible reversal candle, but it fails. It goes up one tick and fails. So it's really just a trap of the longs. These longs that all tried to long this bullish bar, they got trapped. They all got in there and just it immediately failed on them. So I saw that as off of the trend line. It's just a first entry short. It's pretty aggressive. It's into the low, but at this point you knew there was a strong trend. So sometimes those are worth the risk. Not a huge bar either, 10 ticks. All right, so then it came down, and you get this here where you get this pullback to the trend line, fails. This keeps going down. I don't really see any of these. Like a lot of these ones are just making new lows right away, so you don't want to short all the way down here at this point. There just wasn't. I wanted this one to be a more bearish looking candle, and I would have said that would have been a good entry, but it just didn't form that way for me. It formed as a doji, so I couldn't take that. Then down here, you do get this setup, which I really like this one too. It ends up being another one of those first entry traps. So basically, it's a pullback and it's a break of this down channel line. So at this point, you're expecting a new low. So on the first entry here, you actually tick up one tick above and reverse. So this is a possible first entry engulfing bar setup. It's risky a little bit because it's only one leg, but again, you're looking for a new low here, and this was such an aggressive move. So the better entry is this one here, which is a second entry short, because you have a pullback, first entry short, pullback, second entry short below this candle. And that was a really safe setup here. It also trapped. You could tell it was a nice trap. It's only the one tick and then it fails. And you have plenty of room to the low. So this spot here, I took this trade in real time, this second entry short, and my data brokerage completely disconnected while I was in the trade. So it was really stressful because it filled me on 4 ticks and then I had runners and then my thing disconnected. I couldn't get out of the trade. It was a wild ride. Eventually it somewhere closed in here. It didn't fill my take profit order, which was down near these lows. And I ended up having to manually try to close it. Then it opened a long when I closed it because the data brokerage got messed up, which I didn't want a long there, but it entered one. And then eventually I got out of that thing near break even because I finally was able to reconnect. But it was stressful. So hopefully nobody else had a data issue in there, but I did on this swing. And so it happens from time to time. You gotta be aware of that. That's why I love having my ATM strategies because they did at least execute the first part and whatnot. The problem was somehow it didn't execute my stop loss properly. So, but anyway, I ended up making money on the trade, but it was a stressful situation. All right, so then after this, we had this move that kind of rode up here. At this point, you had this aggressive uptrend off of this low. So this one, this short-term downtrend played out to a new low. And I did have this wider channel, which I'm going to look at. where you had those top few swings. So I was expecting when we came back here that we might see a possible short, but it ended up not working out that way. I think there's a few ways that you could argue this went. I mean, the thing is, I drew it like this, but you could totally argue that there's an overshoot here because this price action actually fits really well right there, and then this kind of could be an overshoot in the wider channel. Also, earlier it was like this. I had it off of these swings, and so this could technically all just be a big overshoot, or even something like this, where it fits really well on that price action and then it breaks. So this could all be overshoot down here. You don't really know for sure. So I had it drawn like this just in case. It does fit that one and that pretty well. But when you have an overshoot, it doesn't always respect the trend line on its way back. And that's kind of what happened here. It didn't really respect the down channel. It just kind of blew through it here. And so you didn't really get a very good setup for a trade here. I mean, it broke out of here. Let me zoom in a little more. Broke out of here, and you kind of don't really get any sort of setup. I mean, there's kind of there's maybe a hidden second entry there, but it's not great. Because you kind of have a pullback, first entry, pullback, second entry, higher low that finally breaks above there. I mean, look, maybe, but why would you be looking along here? I mean, yeah, you might get a up on this, but I just don't love this. You're closing below the EMA. It's just nothing there. At this point, it started to look like a range. I eventually drew the range once these lows happened and it came up. So you kind of had a sort of a range working over there. After this break here, it didn't come down and make a new low on this down channel. So it started to look rangy to me. And so anyway, if you had the range, what you could have seen even before the range, before this high, the way I was kind of looking at this was I was looking at this as, okay, we got this channel break. It makes a new high here, but that's like not that convincing because it then comes here and it pushes up one more leg and it gives you this close outside of this channel and a new high all at once with a bearish bar. So that's a possible short below that. This one was kind of weird because it ends up not breaking below that till over here. But I kind of like that in a way because it sort of then almost plays out like a lower high because this one comes up, it swings up to here and then reverses. It almost plays like a lower high right there to kind of confirm that move. And you're far away from the EMA, so this one was kind of worth the risk. It's only 9 ticks. So if you took that, it makes sense because you now have kind of this. You definitely have a couple legs up to a new high from this particular channel. You're overshooting. Your overshoot is kind of probably played out on this upper channel. You are still expecting a new low, so I do like that as a possibility. If this set up as a better lower high, I would have probably marked a red here, but you just don't really get one. Then down here, it comes down into this channel, closes outside, gives you a new low all the way down here. This is supposed to be right there. The reason this is green is just if this candle was more bullish, I would have said that above that is a nice, really nice trade. Because it closed down here, it's arguable if this is closing in the upper 1/3 of the candle or not. So, but there is a range possibly working there. So you could kind of see this as a 1, 2, kind of at least like a triple test there. It's sort of kind of looking like it might go back above, not really go back below that channel. So there's reasons to like it, but it's not ideal in my opinion. Finally, you come up, you then are sideways here. There's a failed second entry long there, but it's too close to the low, so you're not really looking for anything there. I don't even think that there's enough room to get a scalp there, so you don't want to take that, even though it looked like that probably tricked a lot of people who thought they were going to catch the low of the day. They thought they were going to ride this thing down to the new low, and they got fooled because of this here. And that was just because there's a range working now, and you got to be careful. You're kind of shorting into a possible support that has bounced a few times, so it's just not a good idea to short there, even though it looked really bearish. But it definitely trapped people, and they got whipsawed around. It went up and tested this high again. It doesn't really give you a triple test. It's more just like a double top there. So nothing really there. You had this up channel working. You can't short that. Then it comes down. You get this down channel working. it doesn't really give you much here. Unfortunately, the way this works, you do get a first entry, pullback, second entry, but it's not a good signal bar. It then ends up coming back. There's just nothing really there for you. There's not really a high or low that you can take, unfortunately. If you got a first entry, second entry, and then this candle came up and it gave you kind of like a higher low, maybe, but you don't get one. It's a double bottom there. Not anything good there. So no trade setup there. It ends up working over and then starting this down channel that finally does break out of the range. But you can see this range is pretty strong because it came back in over here as I was doing this video. So if you look here, basically what we got is we come down. I don't like this long here. Some people probably would argue that you could take a long here. You might have been able to get a scalp out of that. I don't even think there's enough room, to be honest with you. If you got long 85, it probably would have tapped your order and failed. So, and the reason that one is not that great is that, yeah, you could argue there's a double top, a first entry, second entry long. Problem is, you've got a possible downtrend working. You had the break of this, and it is a new low for that, but it's just, I don't know, it's just not that convincing for me. It didn't come down low enough. If you look here, it is a triple test. But again, I just don't love that one because I just felt like, yeah, I mean, I guess it's low risk. It's a 6-tick bar. The only thing here is just, again, you have this possible swing happening. I mean, you're making lower highs and lower lows. It's not a great setup here. Like to me, and also here's the other thing. In real time, I had it drawn something like this, where it's possible that there's a downtrend working, and yeah, this is a close outside the bottom. But again, it's, when you have one of those on the downtrend, you want to close outside the top. It could have been more like this. You're still in a downtrend overall there. I just don't love that. I just don't love that setup. I was still thinking we need this new low, and this is looking like this could be the channel to give it to us. So anyway, that's why I didn't like this trade. So you got to understand that kind of context. Even though there's a range here, we had this huge down channel, and that's probably the more likely scenario, is that we continue with that trend. We still need to make a new low on this bigger down channel, in my opinion. And you do end up actually getting it, I think, over here. So I think this low ends up being like 1 tick or so below that one. Yeah, so you do actually get it on this channel. And so from here, you don't really get much of a setup here because this makes a new low down here. So this ends up failing. You don't really get anything here. You get this new low, comes up, you just get a first entry there that rejects. So, but at this point, it's looking like it might close back in. So you don't really know for sure what it's going to do here, and then it ends up just running down. And you can't enter this on a first entry short because it just doesn't look like anything. There's no real setup there. You don't know if the range is still going to win out, if it's going to break back in. It's just too risky, even though it's off the EMA. You don't want to take a first entry there. This isn't a strong downtrend channel. It's just a channel. So you make the new low. You get some kind of a reversal here, but you don't get a setup here because you get a first entry, second entry short. That does kind of fail, but not really. It's too sideways, so there's no real setup there. And now it actually looks like there's an uptrend channel working that looks something like this. I'd probably draw it sort of like that. But you're back into this range. And you could actually start to argue that basically we have a bigger range here, and that we're just at this point consolidating in a bigger range, which I'm actually going to draw on the chart like this. And I'm going to leave it there for the day because I like to do that and then see how it plays out when I come in the next day, because I don't trade the later session. But when I come in tomorrow morning, I'll look at what actually played out and how the price action played out. And there's a lot of learnings there. But what you can see here is we got this up channel working. We're back in this bigger range. You'd be looking for this channel top high. Maybe you get a triple test there and get a nice short, possibly. Maybe this breaks and gives us the new high off of there. So what I would be looking for here is I'd be looking for possibly a second entry long to ride this to the channel top. That's a possibility if you get a nice second entry long. The other thing is that you could look for a break of this channel and then a move to a new high that rejects off of these highs up here. And that could give you a triple test off of this test this test. So I'll be looking for that, see what we get. But that's everything for today. I'm going to wrap it up here. Again, I stayed out of trades after that crazy data issue, but I did have a nice trading day. I marked these two after that as possibilities, but I just don't really see anything else in here that is really worth taking. There's just too much choppiness, too many wicks, too many dojis, too much sideways congestion. You got to be careful on days like today because you could, even though there's big movement, there's a lot of congestion and you could get totally torn up on some of those moves. So hope everybody had a good day, and I will see you tomorrow.